They say that genius lives only one story above madness. But what do you do when the story above has been abandoned, and nobody's been paying the electric bill, and the whereabouts of the said genius is completely unknown? Today, we're talking about famous geniuses who vanished or went into hiding. But before we do, why don't you make that subscribe button disappear by clicking on it? Then head into the comments and let us know what favorite historical mysteries you want us to investigate. For now, it doesn't take a genius to get lost in some weird history. In 2010, Russian math master Dr. Grigory Perelman proved something called the Poincaré conjecture, which was a long-running scientific argument dealing with geometry in three-dimensional space. He then proved something called the mic drop theorem by dropping a mic after proving it. Solving the complicated math equation came with adulation, an award, and best of all, 1 million smackaroos. Smackaroos, of course, being the Russian equivalent of dollars. But just because you're offered an award doesn't mean you have to take it. And the newly dubbed Math Sputin decided he simply did not want the notoriety, nor the prize money that came with it. The highly intelligent and highly bearded Perelman also turned down the Fields Medal, worth about $15,000, as well as numerous teaching positions from Princeton and Berkeley. Perelman's sudden rise to fame prompted him to disappear from the public eye. Journalists have attempted to hunt him down for interviews, but none have been successful. All we've got is a less than reputable interview which producer Alexander Zabrovsky claims is the real deal, but which everyone else has pretty much dismissed as fake. Whatever his reasons for denying any compensation or attention for his planet-sized brain, Perelman decided to live his life extremely humbly, allegedly keeping only a table, a stool, and a dirty mattress in his home. Perelman seems to have all he'll ever need, which apparently doesn't include a washing machine. He likens any attention he would get to being on display at the zoo, if someone decided to go to the most boring zoo imaginable. William James Sidis was an extremely gifted child. He could read the New York Times before he was 2, learned several languages by 6, and was accepted to Harvard University at age 11. There, Sidis wowed the Harvard scene with a lecture on 4-dimensional mathematics. In other words, he's the kind of kid you and your classmates would absolutely bully growing up. Sidis presumably endured his fair share of swirlies. Sidis graduated cum laude at age 16 and placed his diploma in storage. And like many people with college degrees, it was the last time he would ever get any use out of it. Rather than use his degree for, math, Sidis churned his way through grad school, law school, and a professorship before hanging up his mortarboard and ditching the academic life. Sidis went into hiding, jumping from job to job and city to city, all in the hopes of becoming a regular working schlub like the rest of us. Hey, Sidis, it's not that great, man. Maybe stick to the genius track and see how that shakes out. Using pseudonyms, Sidis would write an occasional book here or there. One of them was about railroad transfers. His biographer called it the most boring book ever written. Another feather in Sidis's cap. Most of us can only dream of producing a singular piece of art that even bores our parents to tears. And aside from successfully suing the New Yorker in 1937 for publishing an unflattering article about him, Sidis never really went on to do anything of note. Some say his ambitious parents pushing him earlier on in his life is what soured him on the whole idea of academic notoriety. Couldn't he just get a tattoo like everybody else? We can't talk about reclusive geniuses who disappeared from the public eye without mentioning Catcher in the Rye author J.D. Salinger. The famous writer pieced out of Manhattan in 1953 to live on his 90-acre compound in Cornish, New Hampshire, until his death in 2010 at the age of 94. Before his disassociation with society, Salinger wrote that book you were forced to read in sophomore English class. The protagonist, Holden Caulfield, dreamed of living in a cabin alone. Maybe that was Salinger expressing his own desire through his character, though he might call that reading phony. Once during the middle of his self-imposed solitude, he was interviewed by kids for a high school section of the local paper in Cornish. However, the article became the primary feature of the paper, something Salinger took great umbrage with. As a result, he had a 6.5-foot fence constructed around his property, as a not-so-subtle way of saying, "Stay the hell away, junior reporters." Salinger broke his legendary silence once more in 1973, speaking to the New York Times about preventing his uncollected stories from being published without his consent, something he considered a total violation of his cherished privacy. But a posthumous collection called 3 Early Stories was published in 2014, due to those stories entering the public domain and not requiring legal permission. Is it really a good idea to risk angering a vindictive ghost with legal loopholes? We'll let those publishers deal with that karma. While we're on the subject of reclusive literary geniuses, we have to mention author Thomas Pynchon, who continues to grind out novels while remaining mostly invisible. Some of his novels include Against the Day, Bleeding Edge, and Inherent Vice, the latter of which was adapted into a major motion picture starring Joaquin Phoenix. It wasn't the clown one. Pynchon's 1973 novel, Gravity's Rainbow, earned him several accolades, such as the William Dean Howells Medal of the American Academy of Arts and Letters. But he flat out refused the honor, saying, "I don't want it. Don't impose on me something I don't want." Geez, buddy, just take the compliment. Despite Pynchon steering clear of the public eye for pretty much his entire career, he has, inexplicably, appeared on the cartoon sitcom The Simpsons 3 times. Unfortunately, none of the episodes were called Gravity's Rain. But he did provide some feedback to producer Matt Selman regarding a line where his character calls Homer a fat ass. Pynchon wrote to Selman, "Homer is my role model, and I can't speak ill of him." Barbara Newhall Follett was a child literary prodigy who authored the highly regarded novel The House Without Windows at the incredible age of 12, when most of us are pretending to be sick to get out of baseball practice. So it was quite the story when this wunderkind grew up and, at the age of 26, disappeared without a trace following a fight with her husband. Follett had been given unanimous praise for her first book and followed it up a year later with The Voyage of the Norman D. A week before its publication, her father left her family, forcing Barbara to work as a typist to make up for the missed income. At age 20, she had written 2 more books, but with no editor and no high school diploma, Follett found it difficult to find work. Follett married Nickerson Rogers in 1934 and was happy for a while, but in 1939, she wrote to a friend that her hubby was cheating on her. On December 7th, after an argument with Rogers, Follett walked out of her house with $30 in her pocket and was never seen again, much like her character Ypersip from The House Without Windows. Rogers had allegedly been expecting Follett to come back, hat in hand, and thus took several weeks to call the police. Because her maiden name was not on the missing persons report, the media had no idea Follett was missing until 1966, nearly 30 years after her disappearance. If only true crime podcasts existed back then. Margie Profet was an evolutionary biologist with no formal biology training who spent most of the 80s and early 90s publishing novel but controversial work regarding women's biology. Specifically, Profet received high regard for her studies into menstruation, suggesting that it has an evolutionary function and isn't just there to mess up your week. She won the MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant Prize in 1993. And was still living off the 6-figure prize money in 2005, when she finally cut ties with her friends and family and officially became a missing person. Unlike so many others on this list, Profet actually turned back up after 7 years and reunited with her family in 2012. Turns out she was dealing with sickness and had no clue anyone was even looking for her. Rather than burden her family with her issues, she lived in poverty, sustained mostly by the religion she had discovered. What religion that may be is anyone's guess, but we hope it was a fun one, like one of those Viking ones. Have you ever built a house so incredible you're forced to upend your entire life? That's what happened to architect David Thorne in 1954, after his work on jazz legend Dave Brubeck's home. Thorne received a lot of attention for his simple yet modern designs, and suddenly everybody wanted a piece of him. This included rich developers and crooks, 2 types of people Thorne had little interest in doing business with. If you ain't a jazz musician, David Thorne ain't building you a house, bub. So he did what any pioneer of the modernist architecture movement would do. He changed his name to Beverly Thorne and went into hiding, not resurfacing until the 1980s after some work he did in Hawaii. By the time 2006 rolled around, he was able to openly talk about the 1950s steel-supported home concept work that both defined and haunted him. In his defense, Dave Brubeck's most famous song is called Take 5. Thorne just happened to take a very long 5. If the TV series The Bear has taught us nothing else, it's that running away seems like a perfectly reasonable eventuality after working in a stressful kitchen. In real life, there was Nick Gill, the youngest ever British chef to win a Michelin star at the tender age of 21. That's right, the tire company with a Stay Puft marshmallow-looking mascot is also in charge of rating how good a restaurant is. This world makes no sense. But maybe those tires are tasty. Has anyone tried one? Gil seemed destined for all the fame that comes with knowing your way around the kitchen. But by the time he was 42, Gil was suffering from drug and alcohol abuse and had been jailed for attacking his ex-wife. Ratatouille, he wasn't. Estranged from his family and on a downward spiral, Gil told his older brother he was going to disappear and ordered the family to not look for him. The older Gil obliged, and since 1998, nobody has seen or heard from Nick. The only clue to his whereabouts came from a pencil sketch of Nick's that was drawn by his brother, A.A. The sketch emerged in 2014 at an auction, but A.A. Gil said he wasn't going to pursue it. If Nick wants to get in touch with him, he knows where to find him, and he might be the only one. So what do you think? Which of these disappearing acts is the most mysterious? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, make sure to check out some of these other videos from our weird history.